Well, by this time, my mother had contacted a moving company, and most of our personal things were packed. And the Murgatroyd family was ready to move. She contacted my dad. And my dad thought it was an excellent idea. Of course, he was used to things like that happening. And it wouldn't have made a difference if he had not thought it was an excellent idea. We were going. My brother, it didn't make any difference to him where we were located. He would reach us. And so the civil service arrived in Blackpool. 2 weeks before war was declared. 2 weeks before war was declared.
Wow.
And the house my mother had rented in Blackpool had 6 bedrooms. It was the only one she could get. Because there were rumours already in the air, you know, what was going to happen. And seeing that Blackpool was on the west coast, they guessed that they would be safer, you see. So here we were, 2 of us, my mother and me, in a 6-bedroom house. But not for long. One thing about the house that was wonderful was the view. We were facing the Irish Sea. We were right on the Irish Sea. And it was a beautiful spot. Sit in our living room, and you know what, see where that fence is out there, that big fence? That was where the sea would come rolling in.
That close?
Promenade out there.
Wow.
It was beautiful. And when it was stormy, it was so stormy we couldn't open our front door. And we had to keep it locked, and not only locked, those old-fashioned wooden bars that they used to have for barring the door, we had to put one of those across them too.
Why, the wind would blow it open?
And everybody had to use the back doors.
Wow.
When there was some strong gales. It was a beautiful spot, and I really think the location had a lot to do with my mother picking that house. All the years we'd lived in Scotland, we lived facing the North Sea. Portobello in Edinburgh is on the Firth of Forth, and that's an inlet of the North Sea. Now we were living on the west coast, the Irish Sea. And you know, years later when I came here, and I'd go out, I couldn't think what was wrong with my lips. And I never could get my food salt enough. Then I discovered all my life the wind had been blowing the sea air in my face and the salt onto your lips. And we'd always had a wind. So we came to Norway and there was no wind. It was amazing.
How long were you in Blackpool?
We went 1939, and it must have been until I left and came with Randy 1946 or 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
You never went back to the house in
No,
Edinburgh?
we never went back to Scotland.
Wow.
But you see, my mother's people were in Hawick. That's on the borders of Scotland. And the borders Scotland and England. It's about 45 miles from England. And we used to go back there, you see, to visit. Yeah. That's where Auntie Betty was from,
Wow.
like. Immediately, war was declared. We were contacted by the authorities. In this case, the police department. Who was going to occupy these 6 bedrooms? They wanted to know. When our circumstances were explained, 2 lone women, we were immediately told we could share a bedroom and we could billet 20 school children. Oh! The children were all being evacuated from the cities. Manchester was only about 50 miles from Blackpool, you see. And that was a big city. And they felt that the cities would be bombed. And they were evacuating all the school children.
And they later were bombed, weren't they?
What?
Weren't they bombed?
Yeah, we were even bombed.
Wow.
My goodness, yes. And Manchester was our nearest city. So from Manchester, the kids would be coming. Immediately my mother thought, children. If there are children, there'll be school teachers. School teachers will be adults. And off she went to the city hall. When, after a bit of fast talking, and the discovery that one of the people on the board for that decision was our minister, we were told we could have 10 teachers, 2 to each room, you see.
So you didn't have to
Well,
have
that
kids.
was better. They were grown up.
Uh-huh.
By the time she got home, the teachers had arrived.
Huh.
And there were 10 nuns.
Huh.
Sisters of Loretta. They were waiting on the doorstep for her. And they wore all those old-fashioned habits, you see, because that's a long time ago.
Wow.
That's 60 years ago. And there they were. They looked like 10 black crows because they had those long black outfits. Oh dear me. They were from St. Patrick's Convent in Manchester. Our 6 bedrooms were not all furnished, but like wildfire the news spread that we had these nuns, and people from the local Catholic Church were all arriving to see what we needed.
Wow.
What could they give us so that the sisters would be safe and comfortable? Well, it was wonderful, you know. They all wanted to know what they could do to help. And that was great. By the time I got home, about 6:30, everyone was settled. They had their living room, they had ours, and they had the 6 bedrooms. Our bedroom, we had to have a bed sitting room because the sisters had to have the 6 bedrooms, 2 to a bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
So we managed, and the bedrooms had all been allocated, everything was taken care of. Fortunately, for some reason, we had 2 bathrooms, which was very fortunate.
For a house that
Because
size?
in those days,
No?
you had 1 bathroom, you know, especially if you were lucky. It was unheard of in those days. Well, after everyone had a good supper, incidentally, fish and chips from the fish shop, from the fish and chip shop, up by the back of our house. And the sisters thought that was the best meal they had had in years. I guess the food at the convent was pretty bad. I remember Sister Aloysius telling us that they had had tapioca pudding every day for 20 years.
Oh.
So my mother promised she'd never give them tapioca pudding. And oatmeal porridge, and it always had lumps for breakfast. She said they had that ever since she entered the convent.
Hmm.
My mother was an excellent cook, and we all got on well together. We had 3 young postulates, and one of them was designated to stay home from school each week to help my mother, because I was working, you see. Cooking and cleaning for 12 women was no easy task. And it worked well. The young sisters were happy to take turns with the housework, you know, and get a day off school and talk to my mother and really whoop it up. They got up at 6 a.m. every morning, went to church by 7, came home, had breakfast, but not porridge with lumps, and off to school to teach. I left home about 7 a.m. I had to take 2 buses and a good walk, and walk a good mile to get to our offices. With no cars, nothing like that. Everything was confiscated. And I wasn't home, never home till about 6:30. It was a rough time. My brother was flying with the RAF. My dad was at sea. And Mum and I with a house full of nuns. But be that as it may, my mother found time to put an ad in the local paper inquiring about bridge clubs. She was a dedicated bridge player, and the first night it was in the paper, a car arrived at our door. A Mr. and Mrs. Carswell. They explained they were members at the Cremond Bridge Club down South Shore, and they would be happy to take Mum down. They explained that because of his work, he was allowed a certain amount of petrol, gas. So he used some of it once a week to go down to this bridge club at night, and they would pick her up every week. Now she got right into the car and went off with them. You know, you couldn't do that now. She'd never seen them before.
Wow.
But life was much simpler then. From that day on, twice a week, she went off to play bridge at the Cremond Bridge Club. It was a lovely old home down South Shore. Beautiful old place. She became a member, and they had a writing room, a lounge, a conversation room, which I loved, a dining room and a kitchen, plus other amenities. And they managed to have a wonderful time. In the midst of all that upset and hardship and what they had to do, they still managed to enjoy themselves. Even if you had to bring most of the food yourself, because rationing was instituted right away. And then, by then, it was quite rough, the rationing. But the fact that we had the nuns made it much easier. We were allowed 1 bag of coal a week, 100 weight of coal, a bag about so big, a sack, to heat the whole house for a week.
Wow.
And that was all the heating we had. Can you just imagine that? But the Reverend Mother could get coal anytime she wanted it, even though it was brought at night when it was dark and no one could see. And as for extra food, the sisters were always arriving home with half a dozen eggs or a loaf of bread. Sometimes a bottle of mineral oil. Do you know what mineral oil is?
No.
Well, it's a laxative actually,
Oh.
but it was an oil. And the mineral oil we used for baking. You know, as you use cooking oil now, we use mineral oil.
Oh.
However, the government got wise to the fact that that's what people were doing. They were using it not for medical purposes, they were using it to bake and to cook, to fry, because we didn't have any other. We got, I forget how much, I can't remember how much, 2 ounces of oleo a week. That much oleo a week.
You mean butter?
Hmm?
Butter?
Butter?
Yeah.
We didn't see butter.
Oh.
There was no such thing as butter. And, you know, fortunately, my mother knew a chemist, a drugstore, and he would slip us a bottle of unflavoured mineral oil. And it was really funny because you go into the chemist shop to buy maybe some aspirin or something, or see what they had. And he'd look all around the store. There'd be nobody in the shop, you know, but he'd look all around. Open your bag, open your purse, and you'd open your purse and he'd slide this bottle of mineral oil over and you'd slide it into your purse. Oh dear me.